Can you even imagine being so stupid rich that just rolling through a city on vacation causes the whole economy to go into chaos mode? Like full-on hyperinflation for over a decade. That's exactly what went down with this 14th century African king, Mohammed Musa, and his entourage when they passed through Egypt during their trip back from the pilgrimage to Mecca. He and his crew were flinging around so much gold, it straight up crashed Egypt's currency for 12 years. The value of gold just tanked. Oops. In these modern times of tech billionaires and entrepreneur celebs, you'd probably assume we're living amongst the richest guys to ever walk this planet, right? Well, slap yourself, because you'd be straight up wrong. The most hugely stacked individuals in all of human history were actually the ruling monarchs from way back in the day when measuring wealth was more complicated than just checking your bank account balance. You think people like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos are balling out of control with their $200 billion net worths? That pocket change doesn't even compare to the mind-melting piles of wealth some past kings and queens were sitting on. We're talking multi-trillion-dollar fortunes that make our current crop of billionaires look straight up broke in comparison. Let's be honest. Comparing the net worths of past monarchs across different eras and societies is no easy task. In economies driven by trades and taxes paid in crops and goods instead of currency, calculating someone's personal wealth is one big guessing game. How can you truly evaluate the vast land holdings of Persian kings? Does weighing the gold in Genghiz Khan's plundered loot and multiplying it by modern prices really reflect its actual worth back then? Did these nobles directly control their fortunes or just manage massive economies? Alright, so to make a somewhat legit comparison of these ancient ballers' net worths, we had to borrow the technique from the brain boxes over at measuringworth.com. Their whole move is sizing up an individual's personal fortune against the total economic output of their nation or even the entire world at that time. Genius, right? We could rattle off a stupid long list of emperors who were stacking straight cash from their fertile lands and insanely lucrative trade routes. People like Akbar the Great ruling over Mughal South Asia, Darius the Great of Persia, Alexander the Great, Ramses the Great of Egypt, plus a million different Chinese emperors. The list just keeps going. But let's focus on a few of these royal high rollers who made today's billionaires look utterly broke in comparison. Let's start with the richest woman in history, China's 7th century Empress Wu. In 2016, Money.com hit up 30 historians who said Wu controlled a peak fortune equal to 22.7% of the entire world's GDP back then. With 2023's global GDP at $104.5 trillion, this queen was sitting on an insane $23.5 trillion nest egg. Can you even fathom that kind of wealth? Now, in medieval China, women were supposed to be seen but not heard, just popping out kids and staying home on lock. A lady holding real power? Unheard of. Straight up taboo back then. But Wu said, "Hold my chalice," and flipped that script on its head, even if she had to get a little messy with alleged child murder and forcing her sons to dip out so she could rule alone with her shady secret police squad. No wonder her crazy life story has been made into countless movies and shows like the 2015 banger Empress of China starring Fan Bingbing. Wu started as Emperor Guozong's concubine, but she was slick with it and gradually climbed up to become his wife in 655 AD. 5 years later, when Guozong started suffering from migraine headaches and blurry vision, he said, "All right, babe, you got this," and handed over the whole kingdom to Wu, making her the one and only female emperor in all of Chinese history. Talk about an OG power move, going from concubine to the straight-up richest woman ever just by being that ambitious and cutting-throat ruthless. Let's slide over to India, home to tons of billionaire bosses today, like Mukesh Ambani and his $113 billion net worth. But you know who was the richest Indian ever? The Mughal Emperor Akbar, that's who. This dude ruled one of the most stacked empires of his time from 1556 to 1605, valued at a bonkers 25% of the entire world's GDP, over $26 trillion in today's cash. Akbar was that insanely stacked, guys. Under Akbar's reign, the Mughal Empire spread nearly 90% of South Asia. His annual revenue back in 1600 was an estimated £17.5 million. To put that into perspective, the British Treasury only pulled in £16 million 200 years later. These Mughals lived like pure, lavish royalty, putting European kings to shame with their mega sprawling palaces, priceless art, and gems galore that would make the Bourbons, Habsburgs, Romanovs, and Chinese emperors jealous. Akbar's reign was such an over-the-top flex of wealth that the word Mughal became English slang for any ludicrously rich and prestigious tycoon throwing stupid money around. These dudes defined over-the-top opulence. Speaking of raw wealth and power, let's not forget the notorious 13th century Mongol warlord and conqueror Genghiz Khan. At the peak of his reign, Khan controlled a massive 12 million square mile empire, over 3 times larger than modern US borders. When you factor in all the looting, captured riches, and tax revenues he amassed across that stupid scale of land and subjects under his rule, most experts agree Genghis' total net worth was easily in the trillions by today's dollar. Now that's bonkers wealth from a real-life supervillain backstory. Another major contender for the richest individual ever is Augustus Caesar, the first Roman emperor whose reign transformed Rome from a republic into a world-dominating empire that lasted centuries. After taking down Mark Antony and Cleopatra, he inherited massive tax and trade incomes, plus Egypt as his personal property. Not only was he overseeing an empire making up 25 to 30% of the world's economic output, at one point he held personal wealth equal to 1/5 of his entire empire's economy, over $6 trillion today. Imagine Augustus personally owning all of Egypt. That's just an absurd level of riches and power. But as crazy rich as Caesar was, he may have lost the richest ever crown to the next contender, the near mythical Mansa Musa of Mali. This 14th century African king is widely considered the single wealthiest human being recorded in history, with wealth so mind-bogglingly immense, people just couldn't even comprehend it back then. Musa's medieval Malian kingdom was basically the Saudi Arabia of gold mining in the Middle Ages. We're talking about a king so obscenely stacked that he sparked an economic crisis in Egypt just by traveling through and spending lavishly on his legendary pilgrimage to Mecca. Even if Elon Musk had taken the most extravagant vacation he could have dreamed of, he probably wouldn't have caused a regional currency meltdown like that. Mansa Musa ruled the kingdom of Mali from 1312 to 1337 AD. His massive empire, way bigger than modern Mali's borders, built insane wealth from salt and gold mining, plus the horrific slave trade. In fact, a ton of the gold we see in medieval European art and royal crowns came from Mali under Musa. We know so much about Musa because he was a devout Muslim who made the legendary Hajj pilgrimage to Mecca in 1324. Arab historians described him as a real-life Prince Ali from Disney's Aladdin, rolling into towns with an impossibly extravagant entourage of tens of thousands, with dozens of camels carrying hundreds of pounds of gold each. In Cairo, his caravan spent and gave away so much gold that it literally decreased Egypt's gold value for the next 12 years. Musa's outrageous wealth even made it onto the 1375 Catalan Atlas of the World, which depicted him sitting on a throne holding a gold nugget and staff. Mansa Musa is often called the wealthiest person in history. According to Ferrum College history professor Richard Smith, Musa's West African kingdom was likely the world's largest gold producer at a time when gold demand was through the roof. Just how insanely loaded was Mansa Musa? There's just no accurate way to put a number on his outrageous wealth. Records from back then are scarce, and contemporary sources tried to describe the king's stacks in terms that were just straight up impossible to comprehend for that era. Like, they couldn't even wrap their minds around how rich he was. When no one can put his wealth into words, you know he was dummy rich. Before you go, I gotta ask, if you suddenly inherited an incomprehensible Mansa Musa level fortune, what's the first ridiculous extravagance you're blowing all that cash on? A solid gold yacht the size of a small country? Maybe commission the world's largest statue of yourself made from diamonds and pearls? Or just buy your own personal island and pay staff to constantly shower you with million-dollar bills? Let us know all the details down in the comments. Don't forget to smash that like button and hit subscribe so you don't miss the next episode, where we cover the nouveau rich tycoons and entrepreneurs of the modern era who managed to stack insane wealth without the help of crowns or empires. Until next time, stay rich in mind, body, and spirit, my friends.